why that's being so weird. Oh, well, apparently I'm streaming. YouTube doesn't seem to think I am, but I am streaming, so... hello everybody. Hello! You are ready. Welcome to... Let me just find a place to put my fucking... There. Okay. Welcome to Doodles and Dice Shame, everybody. Psych! Animation 101. I sound so loud in my own ears, but the sound check says that I'm quiet, so I need to turn that setting down, I guess. Okay. Before we start, how loud am I? Am I absurdly loud? Am I absurdly quiet? And, who's ready? Hi, Nikki! My best friend, Nikki. We're gonna keep this short and sweet so that Nikki can get to malevolent autopsy on time. Sounds okay to me? You're a tiny bit loud, I think. Okay, that's good news. I thought I was loud. 1 second while I adjust this mic. I'm in my brother's home, so I'm using his mic. Okay. I've turned myself down, apparently. I don't believe it, but I've done that. Okay, so, animation. Here's what I'll say about it. I'm absolutely an amateur, but... Ew, man cave! I mean, in a way, it's a very nice apartment. So, yeah, animation. I'm an amateur. I was pretty much for my entire life using 10 frames per second, and we'll talk about how I was doing that during this. I've only recently started switching to 12 frames or 24 frames per second, and we'll be pulling up old animations that I've already done for Dice Shame. We're going to be talking about looping animations and straightforward animations, which I mostly do straightforward stuff, but recently for fandom culture, because GIFs are what they are and they're great, I've also been learning looping animation. So, these balls. We've all seen them. It's in every animation tutorial ever. And the reason why is it's goddamn important. Memorize everything I'm about to tell you about these balls, because it actually matters, okay? The first thing I would say to start animating is I think that a lot of people think that animation has to or is done by going frame by frame. So in other words, I have a guy here. Here's my guy. Whoa, what a cool guy. Everybody thinks that animation is next frame. He's starting to raise his hand. Next frame. He's raising his hand a little bit more. Next frame. Whoa, his hand's in the air, so I'm gonna do like a little wave. I would say that this style of animation is for the pros, is how I would say it. It's really, really hard to go from one frame to the other and make something that's actually smooth and worthwhile. It's gonna look weird, as I shall display, because it's going to be very short, usually is how it's going to happen. It's always going to be a little bit weird because you're going to be messing around with animation is about consistency, right? So if you're drawing each frame individually, you'll have the last frame to reference, but you won't have the last frame to reference or the last frame to reference, and you won't have an ending frame to reference. So you're not going to keep a consistent animation throughout. So if you have a face and you're animating from frame 1 to frame 2 to frame 3 to frame 4, your face is probably going to get a little bit stretched and wibbly wobbly. I think personally, if you're just starting animation, pretty much everything that you're going to do, you should have a start frame and you should have an end frame, and that's where you should start. You should not start drawing the middle frames until you know where you're going. Pretty much 100% of the time. That'll help you keep consistency, and that'll help you keep where you're going more in your head. We'll talk about that when we go through like actually making an animation, but I just wanted to put that in your head first before we talk about these balls. Now let's talk about these balls. There's two of them. They're beautiful. Except for one of them is a lot more beautiful than the other. It's unfortunate that this gets kind of crunchy with streaming and also with showing animation, but one of these is a ball, this ball, that is done with very consistent spacing throughout. Spacing is so important. It's something that I'm still learning. It's something that kind of comes with whatever you're animating. Don't do consistent spacing unless it's something that is actually moving consistently. Nothing alive is going to move as robotically as you think it is. Pretty much everything is going to have a first, like, moment, and then a lot of momentum is going to build, and then a second moment. So if we go to this frame here. Well, let's talk about the balls first. I'm doing this off the cuff, as you can't tell. I have little bullet point notes about what I want to talk about, but I didn't prepare a speech or anything. I'm an amateur. This ball right here, we're looking at right ball. Right ball starts to move consistently, and then it really speeds up near the bottom when gravity takes over, and then it really stretches here. That's a bounce frame. We'll talk about that later. But pretty much the pacing of that is that almost all of the frames are up here, because if you think about how a bouncy ball balls, if you think about how a bouncy ball bounces and balls, all of the like hang time where it's the slowest is mostly in the air. When it's hitting the ground, you barely ever see it because it's bouncing. So it's not really doing a lot. There's not a lot of frames that you really need to add down here. It's honestly unnecessary for you. Man, that's really crunchy. I wonder why. Let's get rid of the second ball, or first ball. Wonder if that'll help it. Yeah. Seems to be skipping frames to my eyes, but maybe not to you guys. Anyway, point is, this ball is not moving consistently. It's moving pretty consistently up here, but depending on your action, you know when it's going to speed up, and that's when you should start skipping a lot of space. Oh, good. It does look good. Same with Jack's arm here. This is a pretty rough animation, but Jack's arm kind of starts there pretty slowly, and then it zips over there, because we know that when he's moving his arm like that, we know where it's going to be fast. Now, you could have it be the opposite, where maybe Jack's arm is a little bit faster here, and then it kind of slowly moves up to here. That's fine and all, but I guess the point I'm trying to say is that most animation is not going to have consistent movements. You're not going to have... Oh, hello, guy. A guy. Look at this guy. And let's say that he has a start frame of here and here. He's waving. Whoa, look at his good hands. Probably not. You're not going to do like a frame in the middle, and then a frame right here, and then a frame right here. Probably what you should do instead is have a frame right here, and right here, and maybe a smear frame right here, because the idea of seeing the hand there clearly crystal perfect is not realistic. It's going to make your hands look a lot more natural if they're not like totally individual spacing of perfect... Man, I don't even know how to describe this. I am an amateur. But you don't really want consistent timing like this. You probably want something like... This is a lot more realistic. This is pretty much how I animate, is that I do like the first frame, the last frame, then I'll draw the bounce frames, which we'll get into that, and then I draw like a smear in between. That's pretty much how I animate. If anything looks weird or bad, then I start to go in and be like, okay, this jump to this jump was a little bit too much, so I'm going to put a frame in between that. This jump to this jump was a little bit too much, so I'm going to put a frame in between that. That's how you should animate, in my opinion. You should do a first frame. You should do a last frame. And then you should do a bounce frame. If this is your start and this is your end, then this end is going to need a bounce frame no matter what. And then you should start doing Like, well, I think it's a little bit slower over here. So I'll put a frame right next to that that's like a little bit less than that. Being like, okay, I have a, well, let's start a new frame without an onion skin. I have a ball that's going here. I need it to go here. I'm going to do a bounce frame right before it. So we'll get into bounce frames. Just believe me when I say that. I'm not going to put a ball here, here, and here. That's not going to look good. It's going to look pretty robotic and weird. You're probably going to want, if it's slower over here, balls like that. And then maybe a ball here. Or, if it's starting slow, like in our bouncy ball animation, a lot of frames there, a lot of frames there, a bounce frame, and then that ball there. Okay, so I guess the first rule, don't do consistent pacing. This is going to be really robotic. Do more, I guess, structured pacing, organic pacing. Try to figure out where the momentum of your animation is moving and put more frames in the slower part of that momentum and put less frames in the faster part of that momentum. And that'll help your pacing a lot. And animation is inconsistent. You can move the frames around. If you feel like this Mari animation, for example, is really fast-paced, I'm trying to like draw her hands in there, and it seems really fast-paced to me right now. I know that I'm going to have to put some in-betweener frames in there, but before I'm going to do that, I'm going to take the physical frames, which are down here, and I'm going to space them out until I get something that even choppy seems like the right pace I'm going for. So like that. We'll see. Not quite the right pace. I think I want it to be a little bit slower on the end and a little bit faster on the beginning. I think that's more the pace I want. At this point, I would usually go in between those frames and add any missing frames. Like 2 to 3 seems like a really big gap, so I probably would add a couple frames in between there to make that seem a little bit smoother. 3 to 5 seems like a really big gap, so I might add 1 frame in there to make it smoother. Let's talk about bounce frames. I was using 10 frames per second for most of my animations. For most of my animations. Slug It Out, for example, is exactly 10 frames per second the entire time. The reason I was able to do that, 10 frames per second is, by the way, not recommended, is most of animation is start point, end point, and back to start point in this animation. But let's just say that the ball ends there. Start point, end point, and a bounce animation. So let's do a test here. Let's say I got a guy. Whoa, it's a guy. And he's swinging a sword. Boop. Okay, that's my first frame. Last frame, let's imagine that I'm going at 10 frames per second. Last frame is like this. He's like striking the ground. If I was working in 10 frames per second, what I would do is I would move this frame up. And then the frame right before it, Clip Studio is really fighting me right now, I would do a bounce frame. Now this is an onion skin. It's really helpful for you. You should use an onion skin. Adjust it to whatever opacity that doesn't bug you, but you should really use an onion skin. Sometimes I use an onion skin to only show me the frames before, or only show me the frames ahead. Sometimes I like to work backwards with animation, where I start with my last frame and I make it go towards my first frame. Oh, actually, let me show you a really helpful tool to do bounce frames. I know I need a bounce frame here. So I'm going to use a mesh transformation tool in Clip Studio. Really helps with bounce frame. The only thing that's really moving is the sword. So I'm definitely going to add a big bounce frame to that. I want to over-exaggerate what it's doing. Just like that bouncy ball is really stretched out when it hits the bottom, you want to exaggerate what it's already doing. And this is going to happen before the final frame, right? So it's going to look like it's kind of bouncing against the floor. The head moves a little bit more, so I'm going to do more of a bounce frame on that. The legs don't move that much, so I'm going to kind of leave them where they are. because animation is about consistency. And I'm going to space this out so that it looks good. We're using 10, 11, and 12 right now. Boo, Clip Studio, stop fighting me. Yeah, that's basically how I would animate in 10 frames per second, is I would do start frame, end frame, bounce frame. And for quick zippy movements like Red darting around a map or moving his hands around, that works really well. But now that we're professionals and we're using a real animation program, at this point I would probably put a blur frame in here. So we'll put a blur frame right here. Boop. I haven't seen chat go in a while, and I don't know if you guys are rapt listeners or if my stream has been slowing down, but let me know if my stream is still alive. Anyway, I'm doing a smear frame. Smear frames can seem really daunting, but they're actually not. What I'm going to do is about like right before the final movement, which is right there, that sword. I'm going to do a sword like this. And sometimes I use like the motion blur on filters, or I just kind of like do an anime thing, you know? Raft listeners, okay, good. Give it a second to get back to that point. Now, this still seems pretty quick. That smear flame might be too dramatic. But let's space it out a little bit more. Beep. 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 And put an in-betweener in there. Okay. Bounce frames are important when you're hitting an object, but bounce frames are also important when you're not hitting an object. Those two balls that I showed you before, you could say like one of them is made of marble and one of them is made of rubber. I mostly animate using humans. Humans are my cup of tea. I don't really like animating objects or animals, and I think that most fanworks animation are going to be about humans or animals. So, humans are made of flesh, which isn't rubber necessarily, but it is close. You are a soft person. We'll get into why pretty much every human needs a bounce frame for everything that they do in a second. But because humans are fleshy, imperfect creatures, I'm going to have this dude move up a little bit before he does the down swipe. And then I might add another frame right here. Put that in between. To kind of build momentum of like raising a sword up and slashing it down in order to get like a little bit more gravity or a little bit more airtime. Your hands probably would unconsciously move it up a little bit more from your starting position before slamming it down. That I also would consider a bounce frame. Horse? What do you mean horse? Oh, no, don't fucking talk to me about animating horses. I don't want to talk about animating horses. I actually do have a point about animating horses, and it's later, okay? We're not on that bullet point list. Um okay. Let's start from right here. Yeah, that's looking a little bit more cohesive. If anything, I might even add more of a bounce frame down here because he's hitting the floor pretty hard. But that's basically it. I started with the front frame, I started with the back frame, or I started with the start frame, and I started with the end frame, right? I added a bounce frame, and that automatically sort of made it look like animation. I added a smear frame in the middle, and that made it a little bit better. I added a bounce frame at the very beginning of the animation, and that made it better. And then I had a little bit of a smear frame just to help it with that motion, and that made it a little bit better. And that's basically it, gang. It's basically like, where is this feeling like it's not connecting well? Where is it feeling kind of clunky? Put a frame in between those two frames where they're kind of clunky, and just keep going until you have something that's perfect. And you'll find that you don't really need a frame in the middle here. The fast motions don't really need much to be themselves. So, bounce frames. You might think, well, even like slow animations where they're not really doing anything, probably doesn't need a bounce frame, right? Because there's no impact. We're flesh, we're humans, pretty much everything we do needs a bounce frame. It will make every animation look good. Here I have this fist, poorly drawn. It's Jack's fist and he's closing it, right? Nice, whatever. There's a bounce frame in there. The bounce frame is, here. You can see that I'll take my onion skin off. Or actually, I'll enable my onion skin to only show you the next frame. So we won't see any previous frames. You can see that the next frame has him a little bit unclenched, right? The tips of his fingers are a little bit farther up. His thumb is a little bit farther up. This bounce frame comes right before that finished frame. And I'll show you what it looks like without that finished frame, but let's just remember what it looks like with the bounce frame, right? Here's it is without the bounce frame. Kind of weird, right? Kind of clunky, kind of like robotic. Because we're humans and because we all, even ballerinas, have a little bit of momentum and a little bit of flesh and a little bit of impact on about everything they do, you kind of need an impact frame on everything. Even Jack's arm in this animation has an impact frame. It's not impacting against anything, it's just where he's stopping his movement. I still call it an impact frame. But you can see that he actually ends his movement like right there. And I've put a frame that's a little bit farther than where that is. And then I did a frame a little bit closer to where it was. So I kind of wobbled like a metronome. Like if his arm was here and it stopped here, it went from there. I did a frame here and I did a frame here before we even ended there. That kind of like metronome behavior of the arm really helps your frames, really helps your motions to look more organic. I think that if you can kind of see it. If you put like your fingers on a wall or on a desk, but not your palm, and then you put your palm on the desk, you can kind of watch your fingers kind of bounce a little bit. You could kind of watch your palm, even if you're paying really close attention, kind of stick to the desk a little bit more and then unstick. It's not that you're sweaty and gross and sticky. It's just that your flesh is flesh and it moves like flesh. And flesh is gross. I mean, Dark Souls has it locked down that pretty much every big fleshy enemy kind of wibbles and wobbles and moves in a very disturbing way. And while it's very disturbing, it's true to life. They're just exaggerating what's already there. We have flesh and skin and muscle and fat underneath all of our skin that kind of moves like that. Flesh counter, yeah. Count how many times I've said flesh in this. And everything that we do kind of exaggerates itself before it resolves. You very rarely would have a motion where you wouldn't go a little bit farther from the point before you settled on the actual point that you were going. Impact doesn't necessarily mean hitting something. Impact just means stopping. If your arm is going from one direction to another, if you're stopping at some point in time, you're going to wibble a little bit. Like literally, take your finger pointer and put it at your hip and then move it up in the air like you're dancing. It doesn't go there. I'm doing it myself. It doesn't go there and just stop right in the space where you think it's going to go. It goes there and it goes a little bit farther. Like you might even feel like your arm jiggling a little bit. You're made of flesh and your motions are imperfect. I can't emphasize enough how much an impact frame really affects your animation. You really should have a first and a start. You should have a start and an end and an impact frame pretty much 100% of the time. There are very few things that I don't include an impact frame on. I think the ring dropping in the Kraloth animatic, I didn't have an impact frame there because the ring was so solid. I didn't think it would actually bounce all that much. I had a frame where it hit the ground, certainly, but it would have been more like this left ball than it would have been like the right ball. And that's pretty much it. Like there's very few objects that you'll be animating where it doesn't stretch and push even a little bit. In walk cycles, you might think, oh, walk cycles, they're gentle and nice, it's walking, whatever. Whenever a foot hits the ground in a walk cycle, there should be at least a little bit of an impact frame because your foot is hitting the ground and your shoes are probably made of leather or cloth and they're going to impact the ground. And you have to draw an impact frame or else it's going to look like they're just kind of walking on air or not even really interacting with the ground at all. So now that I really drilled into your head that you're made of flesh and impact frames are really important, and we've talked about pacing and we've talked about point A and point B, let's talk about research. Horse animation. Not good at it. Couldn't do it, and the reason why is I couldn't find a fucking goddamn reference for a horse in a 3/4 angle. I could find plenty of horses in a side profile, like wahoo. I could find plenty of horses like this, right? I'm just gonna draw a bad horse right now, and you're gonna deal with it. I could find so many horses that look like this and were running like that, but I could not find any horse that was like this. It was incredibly difficult. I was starting to dig through movies to look for it before I decided that it was too much time on a fan animation. Listen, I'm an amateur animator. Amateur. The reason why I have research on this little bullet point list is because there are so many animation techniques on YouTube. If you feel like you're not getting an animation, you should Google the hell out of it. There was probably a tutorial for it somewhere online because animators like to share animation and like to share their knowledge. Thank God. Um, I cannot emphasize enough how sometimes in art, you know, if you just like push through and try to figure out something and try to figure out how to draw something, sometimes it can work out for you, but most of the time you're just probably going to want to dig up a reference and use a reference. You should quit so fast in animation. There's so there I will save you so much frustration right now. Be a quitter. If you're not getting something in animation, quit immediately and find a reference or a YouTube video and study the hell out of it. I can't even count how many YouTube videos about animation in my lifetime. I didn't go to school for animation. I went to school for painting. So like the point is that like be a quitter, give up, and find the resource that you need in order to do the animation. It's going to save you a lot of frustration because there's too many resources online for you to try to figure it out by yourself. Just let go of your ego and go and look up anything. Okay? So now let's actually look up anything that you need for your animation. Now let's actually like make an animation like with all the things that I stated. Pretty much those 4 points is going to get you a really good start, but for anything more technical, you should probably go watch a pro. I like animating. It's a fun hobby for me, but I am very happy to admit that I am an amateur and I do this as a hobby. Uh, what do you guys want to see? I got 12 frames to work with here. Or even I could just fix up the Mari animation. Let's make this Mari animation better. So we have Mari here. And she is pulling something into herself and starting like a magic spell in the middle. We have a first, we have a last. Stuff's animation lesson. You are flesh. Start, end, bounce. Be a quitter. It's true though. all humans all humans are flesh, and you gotta remember that. You impact against every time. Everything, anything, anything. Anything that you do, you're impacting, I promise. Start, end, and bounce, and be a quitter. Dr. Horrible. Um, yeah, basically. Listen, I'm a wobble wobble wobble. You know what I mean. I'm an amateur. This is mostly the tips and tricks that I've used to make passable animations in a short amount of time because most of the animation that I do for this fandom, I try to do it over a weekend, or I try to do it within a week, or I try to do it, 2 weeks at a time, or like I've never, I've maybe put my heart and soul into a project like 4 or 5 times, but like most of these things I'm trying to bust out quickly and just have fun with it and not think about it too hard. I'm pulling up my bottle animation because I want to show you guys that it's pretty much all in there. All of the things that I've talked about here. This is a looping animation, but even in looping animations, you should still pick a start and an end. In this one, I have 2 starts and 2 ends, which is bottle left, bottle right, and bottle right, bottle left, obviously. Because I have to animate in 2 seconds at a time, it's also really helpful for me, but let's see if I can remember. Jack action, Jack, or red passive. Oh, okay, it's on the first one. Okay. So this start and this end is, we have bottle right and it's ending bottle left. And that's literally how I started the animation, is I drew the red frame over here and I drew the red frame over here. And then I figured out, how's that bottle gonna move? If we just watch the bottle. Stop. I told you to stop. Thank you. Oh, by the way, another animation tip, separate objects. It's gonna save your life to not draw. Listen, here's how I've separated red. I have red in the background, I have bottle, and then I have red's hand on the bottle. That helped me out so much. If I had to draw this bottle with red, with the hand, over and over and over again, trying to match it consistently over and over and over again, I would have died. You want to keep consistent animation. Consistency is what animation is about. So to keep a hand more consistent, I just would copy the hand over and over again to keep a body more consistent, which if you'll watch this animation, the body is the most inconsistent thing because there's a lot of things going on here. There's this head, body, arm, other arm. That was a lot of things to consider as I was drawing every single frame. So if I wanted to make this easy mode, I would separate this arm, the torso, the head, and the left arm, and just draw those things over and over and over again, frame by frame, so that I wasn't having to think about any of the other things. I just had to think about, how do I draw this arm consistently over and over and over again? It's going to save you a lot of energy to kind of figure out the layers of the things that are moving and how you can separate them so that you can keep them all consistent. If you have a head that's moving and you just have like a really close shot of a head, and it's talking and there's hair, what I would do just while thinking about that is I probably would have the head as a layer, I would have the lips as a layer, and I would have the hair as a layer. So I can keep the head kind of consistent. And say the eyes are blinking, I would separate the eyes. I would keep the head consistent, and then I would animate the eyes, then I would animate the lips, then I would animate the hair. All of those things are going to layer on top of each other and it's going to look fine, but it's also going to help you keep those individual components consistent when you need them to look consistent because they're all moving and they're all hard to draw. And if it's blinking and if it's moving a mouth and if it's a head moving and if it's hair moving, drawing each frame where you're drawing all four of those things every single frame, your animation is just not going to be consistent. I don't care how good of an artist you are, it's probably not going to be consistent. It's just, you should really separate what you're animating. There are some people that can do it and they're pros. For us here, the amateurs, we are going to just separate it, okay? So this is my bottle. Let me get back to my point. Starting right. I had it sit here for a bit, and then look at that. I overextended it to the right because it's going to go left, and I knew that red was grabbing it, so he probably would overextend to grab it and then start pulling it towards himself. And there's a frame that's really close to where it used to be, right? It's like barely moved at all. Barely moved at all. Barely moved at all. Oh, it's starting to move. Okay, that was a big jump. That was a big jump, right? It was more towards this grid line, and now it's all the way to the left. And that's because it's moving the fastest there. Ooh, that was a big jump. He pulled it towards himself as he was sitting back down, so it moved really far and really fast there. And then it's almost in its ending position, but it's overextended to the left, overextended to the right, and it's finally reaching middle. And that's where it's in the middle. So everything I was saying about the ball and all about the impact and everything like that, like there's barely any frames in the middle here because it's moving pretty fast. And we'll see this even more exaggerated with how Jack pulls it, because Jack's pulling it magically, so it's moving even faster. And I'm going to show you how the frames are spaced down here in a second. But you can already kind of tell, right? This is in a stable position. Overextend it to the left. Wow, that's really crucial. I overextended it to the left twice because I knew that he was going to pull it really, really fast. So it was probably going to get off balance. And then, wow, what a jump already. What a big jump. What a big jump. What a big jump. And now it's finally in its settled position. I overextended to the right, I overextended to the left, and now it's in its settled position. Those overextensions make it look more like a bottle. Here, I'll show you just it moving. Woo! Pretty good. Sorry, I just patted myself on the back there. Um, and Jack's hand here, you notice that when he touches the bottle, it kind of moves his own hand back. So that's that impact, right? It's flesh. So it's impacting his hand there, and from the force of it, his hand moves back. Then his hand moves forward again, overextends a little bit to the left, and then it settles into its final position. Jack himself doesn't move that much. Jack is just sitting there. I think I have a blinking animation for him, maybe? Oh, maybe that's in the other half. But yeah. Everything I'm talking about there with pacing and impact is there, right? And flesh is flesh. His hand really had to cock back a little bit when he caught that bottle. Uh, I also started with a start point, which the start point was to the left, and I ended with the right. I had red come over a little bit because I needed it to be smoother in the other half of the animation, and that's unfortunately a limit of me having to animate 2 seconds at a time because I refuse to pay a lot for an animation program. But even with this, I started with him over here, and I moved him to the left, and that was my start and end. I had impact frames aplenty, and I had pacing that was inconsistent, right? The pacing of the bottle in the middle is very inconsistent. I'm kind of just repeating myself here, but I think this is one of my better animations for the community, so I'm trying to show you that I'm not making this up. This is the actual steps that I use to make an animation. Um, I love your animation stuff. Earned back pat. Thanks so much. Okay, so right now, this is a 5-frame animation. I have pacing where it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We already have an impact frame here, but I think what I want to do is have an impact frame that overextends a little bit to the right. So we're going to put a frame in between 4 and 5 here called 4A. Don't worry too much about consistent numbers. You shouldn't really, in my opinion, and my beloved partner might disagree with this, you really shouldn't be that organized with animation because you really should be in kind of a flow state where you're just kind of going and not really thinking that hard. We know that it ends there. Oh, right, my onion skin. In this case, I want to see both frames because I want to see where I'm overextending to. We know that it was here. We know that it ends there. So I want a hand that comes a little bit to the right of the final frame. Maybe the magic that she's summoning is kind of pushing her hands back a little bit like magnets. Or maybe she's just a human person who has to adjust to get into final position. It's really up to you. If I wanted to overemphasize that the magic was pushing her back, I might do a couple frames where it goes back and then settles into position. But since I'm just going to play this off as a human being with flesh, as you must remember, we are all flesh and blood, and our skin moves like our skin moves. Um, I don't know where I was going with that. Somebody finish my sentence for me. Okay, so I have an overextension to the left, or to the right. Yeah, I think that her arm especially is maybe a little bit exaggerated, but we'll call it there for that. And then, oh, another thing that I want to talk about, but I don't think I'm going to be able to show you is, maybe I can show you in a previous animation. What's an animation that I've done for Daishame? What's even one animation? Can't even think of one besides the bottle animation, but I don't want to do that one again. What's an animation that I've done for Daishame? Maybe the walking animation for Jack? Um, oh, and you should pretty much always sketch for an animation. Like, it's super important that you sketch for an animation. Um, I think only the pros can really start with line art and get something that's like beautiful and perfect. Um, Monsieur, where is the walk animation for Red or for Jack? I mean, there it is. Okay, it's called Jack's Bell Walk Cycle. Well, that's okay. Maybe in animation you should be a little bit more organized than me. Um, and have really consistent names. So Jack's boots here. Personally, I rushed this over a weekend, and so the knees are a little bit wibbly wobbly in this, more so than I would like. But I knew that keeping these frames consistent with the boots, I had to keep them very consistent. So you know what I did? I drew one really good boot. And this is important in animation. Listen to me, this is important in animation. It's gonna seem like cheating, but it's really important. I drew one really good boot. And then I copied that boot over and over and over again, and I used it as my sketch layer. In fact, Esperanza has watched me before animate something where I copied and pasted certain segments of my animation, like let's say in my testing range. Let's say I drew like a really good face, like a so good face, like it's like super good. It's like so good. It's like such a good face. It's like so good. And I know that it's going to be the subject of your attention because it's the one thing that's moving in the frame, so I know that I needed to keep consistency. If I want to move that face, I might even, and this is really important, it is really helpful, and it's going to seem like cheating, copy that face, move it over a little bit to the place that I want it to be, and use it as my sketch layer. I'm going to turn my onion skin off. Um, and then copy it like that. Do the little bitty changes that I need to do. Like maybe I want his nose to come forward a little bit, but I'm going to use the exact same drawing underneath this to make sure that my lines are as consistent as possible. Copying and pasting your previous artwork is like so helpful in animation, I promise you. And maybe I want his ears to bounce a little bit. All the little things that I want to move on his face, I'm going to change that. But everything that I want to keep consistent, like his hair or his eyes or his tongue, mouth. Okay, imagine this is a really good face. I might like just try to copy my lines as best as I can, or even just copy the actual thing and just erase the parts that are moving. Sometimes the human eye can catch on to that a little bit, where if you literally use the same drawing, it your eye is kind of expecting little differentiating stuff, so sometimes you don't literally want to copy and paste, but if you copy and paste your previous art as like your sketch layer, quote unquote, it'll help you keep consistent animation without making it look too samey where the human eye is like, that looks weird. I can't explain why that's a thing, but the human eye can really catch on to the same drawing over and over again. It's quite, if you've ever watched like any of the what are those animated music videos like Skull, like it's like the Scooby-Doo crew but different, and one of them killed Shaggy killed the blonde one, and then the blonde one became a ghost. Do you guys know? Mystery Skulls? Mystery Skulls. Those Mystery Skull animations are a very specific kind of animation where they use puppetry animation, where they literally do move the same image over and over and over again. They're not drawing it over and over again. I mean, they might for some like angle changes, right? But for the most part, you'll kind of watch the same drawing move, and that has a really distinctive style, and you can look at that and go, that's not Ghibli, because it's a very specific style of animation. I personally am not a big fan of puppet animation. I admire it for what it is, and it is very hard, but it's not really the style that I go for, and it's not really the style that I like. If you literally copy your artwork over and over and over again and only to change the things that you need to change, it's going to start to look like puppet animation. And human eyes are really good at catching that really quickly, so be careful. Um, Hunter-gatherer survival skills. Yeah, copy and paste your artwork. It's a hunter-gatherer survival skill kind of thing. I think there was one more thing I wanted to talk about. Mm, I don't know. We have 15 minutes left. What do you guys want to do? Is it with this? I don't remember. Anyway, point is. A lot of these things were copied and pasted, actually. Like Jack's face. I knew his hair was going to move, but Jack's face I kind of copied and pasted as a sketch layer so that his face would at least be a little bit consistent. As we look at the little frame, as the literal frame by frames, it's maybe a little bit easier to tell where this line discrepancies is, but when it's moving, it's hard to tell. Um, and like the torso region, I kept mostly the same because the torso's not really moving that much. I'll do a bob up and down, but you know. Oh, Nikki, I was referring to the humanized knack for noticing things too exactly the same. Yeah, good job, Nikki. It's definitely that. Um, yeah. Let's see. Is there anything else that's important? I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not your mom. I don't have to make sure that you guys are good animators. I'm just giving you the tips and tricks that I use to make sure that my animation is easy and fast. Easy, fast, and looks passable. Uh, so yeah. Any questions, I guess? Is there anything specifically about like animation that really confuses and bungles you? Because I'll do my best. We got 15 minutes left. I might just talk. I'm kind of tired, and my tablet is really fighting me. So we can talk about Dice Shame instead, if nobody has questions. Wow, 4 people listen to this. That's crazy. You guys really want to learn about how to animate, huh? In my opinion, if you know how to draw, you can kind of figure out animation. Animation is one of those things where like if you really just try really hard and you just kind of sit down and give it your best shot and try to fix things when they look wrong, you'll probably be great at animation. It, it's a game of patience where you have to really sit with it and go, yeah, I made a mistake there. I should redraw that frame. Or, yeah, I made a mistake there. I'm just gonna get rid of that frame. Oh, that's important too. In animation, you may occasionally need to delete frames. You might think, oh, that's counterintuitive. I just draw that whole frame, but it's kind of clunky and weird. It's making the pacing a little bit slower than I would like, or a little faster than I would like. Baby, you might have to erase a frame, and it might serve you a lot. It's something that like I meant baby to the general crowd, but also to my darling in the chat. You might have to delete a frame and it's gonna hurt, but if it makes your whole animation look better, it happens. It actually, I do that quite a lot. If a motion is a little bit too clunky, sometimes before I add frames, I try deleting frames to see if it's smoother, and then you can really see the problem frames and see if you need to either replace them or just get rid of them whole cloth. So, uh, have you played around with animating landscape panning slash zooms? I had an idea for a long time, and my patience makes me hesitant to really give it a try. Yeah. So backgrounds and landscapes, I think realistically, the easiest way to do it for like to not lose your fucking mind is to just draw a really big thing. Like, hold on. I'll do it right now, Nikki. I'll show you. The current dimensions, you guys can't see my menu, but the current dimensions of this animation is 1520 by 1080. I recommend 1920 by 1080 if you're going to do anything for YouTube or any kind of video software. But I'm going to do a landscape that is 1920 by 1080. So that's about 4,000 over what we have. What I would do, Nikki, to move a landscape across is if you have Premiere, I would just make a landscape that's bigger than my animation project and literally move this to the left or the right. I think that's how they do it in proper animation, but this is the easiest way to do it. If you don't have Premiere or any kind of video editing software, which you should, there's a lot of free ones. And they're pretty intuitive to learn. The one that I was using before I started using my Premiere that I got very legally is, what's it called? Let me just look at my desktop really quickly. I don't know if you can still see, but the free one I was using is Mini Tool Movie Maker. Totally free, and it does stuff like that, where you can move a... Oh, you guys can see my desktop. That's funny. Welcome to my desktop, everybody. Anyway, Mini Tool Movie Maker. It's free. It'll do that for you. If you can't get a program to let you move that moving landscape across, I would export this as a PNG, and this is gonna drive you nuts, but it is a way to do it. Oh, wait, hold on. Boop. Let's name this background. Boop. Why do I name things stupid? I'm like, illustration. Illustration is already taken. Background. Background is already taken. All right, background lol is what that one is called. I would put background lol into this animation and put it as like a background animation, not like the actual layers I'm working on for my characters or anything like that. And Nikki, I would just move it a little bit to the left and then copy and paste it to the next frame and move it a little bit more to the left and move it a little bit more to the left and move it a little bit more to the left. And that is how I did a lot of animations when I was working at 10 frames per second and I ever had to do a landscape moving. I don't really like doing this. It's kind of bullshit and you have to figure out the timing yourself, but it is an option. And if it's too frustrating for you, use a video program. And for zooming in then, similar idea, but scale up and large. Yeah, absolutely. Just make it bigger than your actual canvas and zoom in. Or use a free video program. It'll save you a lot of tears and frustration. Oh, no, no, desktop. Hee hee. Yeah, well, enjoy. Okay, we got 8 minutes left. Anybody got any other questions? Or should I draw something silly? I'll take requests. Apple Day. There you go. Plug your Ko-fi. My Ko-fi's in the description. Do whatever you want with it. I love him. Enraged red in the back is so good. Yeah, thank you. I especially love his crappy little middle fingers. You know what, guys? Since Malevolent Autopsy is right around the corner, I might just call the stream here and let you guys take a little break from streams before you hop into another stream. I feel like we've talked about everything I wanted to talk about, and I feel like you guys know how to animate now, right? Everybody knows how to animate now, right? You guys could tackle animation easy fucking peasy, right, guys? Easy peasy. Just gotta remember, scrolling up, scrolling up, scrolling up. Point A to point B, pacing, impact, and research. Easy, says Scotty. Or, sorry, Honorary Alex. I love you, I'm an expert now. See, it's easy. Honestly, it genuinely is pretty easy. Especially with the mesh tool, you could kind of just do start to end point bounce frame and get pretty close to an animation. I mean, that's literally all of Sluck It Out, is B first to last, and then a bounce frame right before the last frame. It's like, if you watch Sluck It Out, you'll kind of see it. There are very few instances where I'll add a smear frame or add an in-between besides just first, last, bounce. Uh, Master Animator's here in chat now. Also being a quitter. Yeah, everybody gets it now. You are made of flesh and quit immediately. All right, let's end the stream there, guys, so that you guys can have a 3 whole minute break before autopsy. Bye bye, everybody. Say it with me.